he'd always went person overboard rule. He appointed Mrs. Tubman and me official spotters. If anyone fell into the water, our job was to point. No matter how the boat turned, no matter how it rocked, the spotter had to keep pointing so the person overboard didn't get lost. Maybe I should wait here, Jimmy said. Nah, once we get going, you're going to like it, I told him. I don't know, Jimmy said. I'm not the world's greatest swimmer. Nobody's going swimming, I said. This water's so cold you'd have hypothermia in a couple of minutes. Hypo who? Jimmy said. Hypothermia, I said. That's when your body temperature falls really low. Most people who die when they fall in the water die from that, not from drowning. I think Jimmy would have jumped back onto the dock if we hadn't sailed away right then. Oh, my hat! Mrs. Tubman cried as we got going. The wind took my hat! We watched as it slowly drifted down into the water. Sorry, Jean, Dad said. You should have pinned it into your hair. I didn't know, Mrs. Tubman said. Now you do, Dad told her. I really like that hat, Mrs. Tubman mumbled. I don't think Dad heard her. He was at the tiller, which is the stick that steers the boat. Soon we were moving along really fast for a sailboat. I liked the whoosh whoosh sound as the boat cut through the water. Dad relaxed a little. So did the rest of us. We held our faces up to catch a few rays. Don't forget to use plenty of scent and lotion, Grandma said. Sheila slathered it all over herself. By the time she was done, she smelled like a coconut factory. I never burn, Jimmy told Grandma. Me neither, I said. Aren't you lucky, Grandma said. We sailed along that way for an hour before Dad called. Anybody ready for lunch? Yes, we all answered at once. We dropped anchor near a small island. I handed out our lunch bags. Jimmy had brought his favorite, sardines and onions on rye. The rest of us had cold chicken left over from last night's dinner. Am I hungry? Jimmy said, gobbling up one sardine and onion sandwich and starting on the next. Me too, Sheila said. I've never been so hungry my entire life. It's the salt air, Grandma said. It does wonders for your appetite. The three of us polished off a bag of chips, a box of cookies, and all the juice. Then we hit the fruit. Don't stuff yourselves, Grandma told us. It's better to eat lightly when you're sailing. But we're anchored now, Jimmy said, helping himself to a second peach. Grandma raised her eyebrows. After lunch, we relaxed for a while. Dad took a snooze. Grandma and Mrs. Tubman had a heavy discussion about the problems of the city. Mr. Tubman read a mystery, and the three of us played hearts with the deck of cards Sheila had brought in her bag. I'm always prepared, she told us. After a couple of hands, she said, Speaking of prepared, is there a bathroom on this boat? Look around, I told her. Do you see a bathroom? Since we were in an open boat, it didn't take much to figure out the answer to that question. Well, what's a person supposed to do? She asked. A person is supposed to go before. I did. Then a person is supposed to wait until we're back. She checked her watch. That's almost 2 more hours. If it's an emergency, Dad has a bucket, I told her. A bucket? Sheila said, That's disgusting! Jimmy and I sang at the same time. Just when I think it's possible that the two of you are human beings, you prove that I'm wrong. Sheila's outburst woke Dad. He checked his watch. We better get started. We'll be heading into the wind on the way back, so it's going to take longer. Once we were underway, it felt a lot colder than before. We put on sweatshirts. Sheila shivered and moved closer to me. I moved away from her and closer to Jimmy. It got more and more windy as the sky filled with big gray clouds. The boat tipped and water splashed over the rails, spraying us. That's when Jimmy grabbed my arm and said, I feel funny. Dad, I called. Jimmy feels funny. Keep your eye on the horizon, Dad told him. What horizon? Jimmy asked. His eyes were rolling around in their sockets and he was turning green. Grandma said, breathe through your nose, Jimmy. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. There were waves now with white caps. The boat tipped way over and Sheila screamed, do something before we all drown. It's all right, Grandma said. This is a keelboat. It can't go over. It can't go over, I told myself. It can't go over. Jimmy was trying to breathe through his nose like Grandma said. I think he was more scared than sick. A puff is coming, Warren, Grandma called. A puff of what? Sheila cried, grabbing me. A puff of wind. Look at the water. You see it's rippling in front of us? Then she shouted to Dad, Warren, head up in the puff. All of a sudden, the boat, which was already tipped halfway over, tipped so far the sails touched the water. The Tubmans screamed and clung to each other. Sheila dug her fingernails into my hand. Jimmy groaned and hung onto me. He breathed his sardines and onions right into my face. Let Muriel take the tiller, Mrs. Tubman yelled. You want Muriel to be captain? Fine, Dad said. Really, Warren? Grandma said, you're overreacting. But she switched places with him and took the tiller, shouting out orders. Ease the sheets, Warren. We're going to sail off the wind. It may take a while longer, but we'll all be more comfortable. The boat straightened up and sailed more smoothly. Jimmy released his grip on me, so did Sheila. Her nails left marks on my hand. The Tubmans breathed more easily. That sucked. Grandma sailed the boat in like a pro. She explained everything as she did it to make us feel more secure. Now, as we pull up, Warren will jump onto the dock, she said, and while he ties us up, I'll drop the sail. She looked over at Dad. Wait for me to give you the signal, Warren, but Dad didn't wait. He jumped too soon and landed in the water. Person overboard! Sheila shouted. Mrs. Tubman and I remembered our responsibilities. We pointed at Dad. We pointed as some guy from the dock reached into the water and pulled him out. We pointed as someone else wrapped him in a blanket. We pointed until Dad looked at us and called, okay, that's enough. You can stop pointing now. He was shivering so hard his teeth clicked. Mr. Fargo picked us up in his truck. As soon as we put into the driveway, Sheila jumped out and ran for the house. I have to go so bad. Did you all have a nice sail? Mom asked the rest of us. Then she noticed Dad. Warren, how come you went swimming in your clothes? Dad didn't answer. I'll be in the tub, he managed to say, heading for the house. Mom looked at Grandma. What happened? She asked. Oh, the usual, Grandma said. All's well that ends well. Fudge jumped off